Good afternoon and welcome to another exciting edition of Day 4 with the man Frank Scalish on Day 3 at a special time. Frank, sometimes you got to do work when duty calls. You got a full plate and I've got a full plate. So we're racking out a live Day 4, number 110 on a Wednesday.
On a Wednesday. It's throwing me off, man. It's throwing me off everything.
What is it throwing you off on?
Well, I have ice water in my coffee mug, which was the first thing. I went to take a sip of nice hot coffee and it's ice water. And we're on Wednesday instead of Thursday. And that's what I'm saying. We're supposed to get rain starting tomorrow, and it's supposed to go all the way to next Thursday.
That's 7 straight days of rain, Uncle Frank.
Right. I'm building an ark.
Jeffries would always say that. He'd be like, they're lining up 2 by 2. And then he would talk about something from the Wall Street Journal, and then he would complain about his internet, and then we'd start the show.
Should I do that? They're lining up 2 by 2.
That's perfect. You are a man of incredible routine, so thank you for stepping a little bit outside the comfort zone.
That's okay. I can break routine. I don't like to, but I could. Easy. That's why I did it.
Something you like getting in the routine of is catching giant smallmouth, and you have been doing that.
Yeah, my boat's running really good, so I can venture out into the great unknown abyss. Who doesn't drink coffee all day? I know. Swear, that's the truth. I
drink it. I'm on my second. I didn't have any food in the house because it's pouring, and then we had to do 3 shows. So I've got some boudin thawing out in the kitchen.
Nice.
And I'm on my 3rd cup of coffee.
Nice. I polished off a pot of 5-alarm Black Rifle this morning.
This is the Sasquatch, whatever that one is.
Of course, you had to get to the Sasquatch one.
Yeah, well, it's the darkest. I like a bold cup of Joe.
Nice. So yeah, so rain. That's what this spring up here has been really bizarre because here, look, there's some lakes that are just going off right now. I mean, they're just on fire, but they're getting pounded to death. So I avoid those lakes. The more crowded the lake gets, the less I go to the lake. I pick other places to go. And sometimes you make a choice and it's not the correct choice, because sometimes if you have the ability to follow a bite, you should follow it, because you'll catch more fish. So there's a certain lake that I go to that when it's right, it's really, really right. And I drove over it and saw that it was flooded. Oh. And I said, ooh, this is going to be right. So I'm going. And this was last week. Well, last week we had 2 days of a severe cold front. And we lost 10 degrees of water temperature in 2 days.
That's not good.
No. And I went there and it was not happening. I caught 1 bass, a muskie, 2 white bass, rolled a crappie, because I was flipping, and the crappie took the lizard, and I set the hook because I thought it was a bass. I set up on it and rolled this about a 1-pounder over a branch, and he came off, and I was like, damn, I should have brought my crappie stuff, because I didn't bring any crappie stuff with me. So I am going to revisit this body of water, because it's got to be getting right now.
But then sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just to say, before I sidetracked you, I had brought up the brown fish. You're also on a strong smallmouth bite as well.
Yeah, I am. And it's the section of the lake that I'm fishing is pretty much has been a dead zone for a long time. And so I'm really experimenting. I'm fishing sections of the lake that I never went to before, or B, haven't had success in a long time on. only because I'm curious. You know what I mean? Um, it just may I'm just curious to see what's going on. Well, um, I unlocked a little thing
Ooh.
last week that I never had an opportunity to elaborate on. Um, but caught some big ones.
Ooh.
Not a lot of fish, but some big ones. So I want to go back and I have to poke around. I have to see if I made a mistake and just didn't find numbers or if the numbers just don't exist there because that's what happens a lot of times. They did a study on smallmouth which was crazy in the Great Lakes. Um and they rarely move 5 miles to 7 miles from where they were born. And so when you have all these tournaments here and the guys run down the lake, catch
Mhm.
fish, bring them up the lake somewhere else, you're talking sometimes you're running 40 miles. And so when you relocate those fish, they never go back to where they are, where they were, where you caught them. So a long time, when I was younger, there was sections of the lake everybody would run to, and we removed all the fish. I
Yeah, it
say
takes
we because
generations.
Right. I say we because I was part of the destruction, unknowing back then. We didn't have the knowledge
Mhm.
that we have today. Um, and so we literally took tons and tons of smallmouth and relocated them, and they never came back. And so I'm just like, sometimes I get a, a bee in my bonnet or a bug up my rear end, and I gotta figure something out. And so I'm trying to see how far I got to go to start getting into populations again. If there's any populations coming back where they weren't for the last 10 years. And so this is a good time of year to do it because all the fish are coming within range and I don't have to go out to 40, 50 feet of water to catch them. Um, and honestly, I don't even like catching them out there because when you're catching them, well, you can hurt them as deep as 28 feet, but when you get into the 30-foot range or more, most of those smallmouth are going to die from delayed mortality. So I don't even like fishing for them when they get out there. I know a lot of guys that do, um, and I try to explain to them that all the fish they just took pictures of for their Instagram are going to die. Um, but they don't, I mean, so it's weird. Smallmouth's weird. I have this um I hold them in very high esteem, and but I'm very respectful of the
Mhm.
animal. You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah,
very respectful
that's
of
reasonable. I I just a picture over the course of a summer, you catch one off a shoal 40 miles away, hangs out outside the marina on the first little rock pile. A couple weeks later, whoa, Jim, what are you doing here? I don't know. How'd you end up here? I don't know. By the end of the summer, the whole gang's back together.
them. Right.
Yeah,
The whole school's back
whole
there.
whole damn family's back together out
Right.
there. It's just like where we were, except at a new place, and there's a lot more tubes.
Yeah, it's just like where we were, only
Yeah.
different.
Explain. I don't know if you've ever done that on the show. I remember growing up, going to Lake Erie with my uncle and my dad and trolling and stuff, and then doing a couple charters out there. But the dead zone thing, explain the Lake Erie dead zones. Are those still a real
Yeah.
thing out there? Like, what are those? Isn't it like an oxygen or a algae or something where there's literally like no fish in miles and miles and miles?
Some of that happens with farmland runoff. The nitrogens, the fertilizers, they run into the lake. You have a massive algae bloom, and then the algae all dies, and then it sucks the oxygen out of the part of the lake. Right now, it's not so prevalent because we have a lot of wind, a lot of rain, water's constantly moving. That happens pretty much more in the summertime, and there'll be these zones where there's just no fish
Like, how
occupying
big
them.
though? Like, huge.
Yeah, some can be massive. I mean, we had an algae bloom one year, and I was fishing in it. I caught about a 6 pound walleye on a jerk bait, and that was the only thing I caught there. And it was weird. I didn't know about it, so I started researching it because that's kind of what I do. I started researching it and found out, how it happens and so on. Real strange. Lake Erie's not like a lot of other lakes. In other words, there's going to be ranges of where you can catch your fish. Like if you go to St. Clair, Lake St. Clair,
Hmm.
for example, I can honestly tell you that you have an opportunity to literally drive your boat and just shut it down anywhere you want, and you have a possibility of catching a smallmouth. Literally from bank to bank, the middle of the lake, it doesn't matter where you go, you have that opportunity. Lake Erie is not that way. Lake Erie has specific depth zones that these fish will utilize. And if you're not in that specific depth zone, you're not catching them. If that range is, you know, say 25 to 30, if you're not in 25 to 30, you're not catching them. That's just how the smallmouth are in that lake. So it's important to establish a depth range first on that lake. Now, Champlain and Oneida, the inland smallmouth fisheries are completely different. And honestly, they're a lot of fun to fish because you can have multiple patterns going on in those lakes at the same time. And I love that because now you have the ability to say, I can run this pattern and I'll catch 2 to 3 pounders. I could run this pattern and I'm going to catch 4 to 5s. And then with those inland lakes, you've got largemouth overlap. So you'll have places where both are intermingling at the same areas.
Hmm.
The year I took second place on Champlain, I was catching them smallmouth flipping a half-ounce jig, and I was catching both largemouth and smallmouth in the mix. I didn't know if I was going to get a 4 pound smallie or a 4 pound largemouth. And it was so much fun because I had other patterns, but I couldn't catch the bigger ones doing them. So I just said, forget it.
Just gonna go
You know, I, I
fish.
th- yeah, I threw the drop shot in the rod locker. I said, I'm not even taking it out. And I literally fished the tournament with 2 jig rods on the deck of my boat.
Now, something that's always gotten me a little befuddled. And I haven't fished a tournament on Cayuga or Champlain, but definitely Oneida is smallmouth in the grass.
Oh, love it,
As
dude.
a guy from who lives in Oklahoma who goes up north, it's just something you don't think about. But the more time I spend up there and the more guys I talk about it, especially the more time I spend on Oneida, I think that there's an underrated pattern of targeting smallmouth in grass, and they
Eh,
actually use and relate to the grass, but much different than largemouth do in some instances, and then exactly like largemouth do in other
right.
instances.
A lot of times you'll get packs that roam. You'll pull up on a section of the grass and then you'll literally start waylaying them, and then they're gone because they're pushing through. Then you get fish that like what they got and they stay put, and it's really weird. A lot of it's predicated on wind and current direction, wind generated current, as to which side of the grass they're going to be on. Are they going to be on the inside grass edge? Are they going to be on the outside grass edge? But though, here's a common denominator for smallies in the grass. Okay, and we're going to get into this in next week's show. We're going to get a little into it. Um, I, we'll talk about next week's show later, but I have this I have this stuff for next week's show. But you're going to want, when you find the grass, what I found is sometimes they'll pick a specific vegetation and they want a specific vegetation. Other times you have to have sand mixed in with the grass and then with scattered boulders. And then other times they're going to be on the grass edges where you need a more definitive break line and hard bottom on the outside edges of the grass. That's kind of where, that's kind of the trick to smallmouth in the grass.
The smallmouth that I've experienced in the grass are more, it's almost like a cat and mouse deal. Like, especially on Oneida, it's like the smallmouth sit on the grass and use it as an ambush point to bear spots that are in it. That was something that was really cool with the
100%.
smallmouth, because you could almost always tell it was a smallmouth if you pitched into the grass, largemouth. If you pitched into the bear spot into the grass, smallmouth. But if you got up, you could see the bear spots. So the smallmouth had to be positioned on the outside, waiting for a goby, a perch, a crayfish, or something to wander out into it, and then it was like shoom, and they all
Yeah.
shoot out like Bama with a little toy, right?
100%. I mean, that's exact. Smallmouth are like cats. I mean, they are exactly like cats. The thing with the holes in the grass that you mentioned, you're 110% right, and that's actually very prevalent in Lake Michigan and some of the
Oh,
estuaries
that works
off
on the
the lake.
Great Lakes too.
Yeah,
That kind of
100%.
rock pile in the grass deal.
Absolutely, it's money. It's absolute money. Um, and so it's a really fun way to fish for them, because you have a lot of options available
Mhm.
to you at that point. So it's really a great way to fish for them, which is kind of why I love those Finger Lakes. I love them, and especially Champlain, because I've done things on Champlain that, one day I'm drop shotting in 22 feet of water, and the very next day, I'm fishing frogs on grass edges. So it's really cool, and one of the funnest bites I ever had with smallmouth I was catching them on horny toads, real shallow grass, and it was fun. Except they suck. They miss them all the time. They that's the problem with it. And you're like, oh my god, and you're vibrating on the front deck. It's exciting though. It is.
So when you're in the grass there, then I mean, I would assume you're flipping a jig, you're throwing a Texas rig, and then
Yeah.
if there's bare spots in it, you're throwing a net
Yeah, well, I'll throw a
or a
flick
drop
shake.
shot, a
Yeah,
flick shake. Okay.
I'll throw a flick shake in the bare spots. Um, but yeah, for the most part, my flipping game for smallmouth is pretty simple. It's a jig, spine craw, or a speed craw, and a lizard.
Okay.
And that's kind of what
So you're
I.
beefing it. You're beefing it. You're
Oh yeah, I
going with
don't.
a
Oh yeah, I don't monkey around. 17 to 20 pound fluoro, half-ounce jig, or a three-quarter ounce jig. I'm not playing. You don't have to. Everybody, first of all, when you're in the grass, the bass doesn't even know the line is there. There's too
that's a good
much
point.
stuff. There's too much stuff growing up and down. They don't know. Um, you're not looking for, I'm not looking for, like, on a Ned rig, you want that thing to drop a certain way. Flick shake, you want it to be nice and slow so the thing butterflies its way down. But with flipping grass, you really want that thing where the massive roots starts to spread out, because you're catching them out of the caverns.
Mhm.
They make tunnels and caverns, throughout the grass, the way the roots grow up and the grass spreads out, and you really need to get to that base or in that tunnel. So I'm not really too concerned. And then the other thing I like to do is, two things happen. Either I flip into the grass and I lift it up and yo-yo it down,
Mhm.
lift it up, and yo-yo it down, or they hit it right when it comes through that cavern, and it's like it's falling down, and it's boom, and it just keeps on trucking.
Now, is that a good idea that you need to get back in there quick because there's probably more than one and they hit it so fast because it was competition?
Yeah, that competition is a big thing, and what I found with smallmouths is, there's generally never just one. There's more. You got to flip around, but there's more. When the craziest thing on Champlain was, um, the milfoil and the cabbage grass was the key. So if I had patches of milfoil and there was a small patch of cabbage grass in there, that was the money shot, right where the milfoil meets the cabbage. And then what I also found was that the largemouth wanted the thicker, heavier milfoil clumps. The smallmouth wanted them broken and cabbage mix. So when I was fishing, I could go, oh, I'm going to catch a largemouth here. I'm going to catch a smallmouth there.
Hmm.
Now there are times it overlaps
Yeah.
because those fish are constantly moving, but for the most part, it was right on the money for me. And I had one largemouth. It was a 5.5 pounder um, that I had in practice that I was fishing without a hook on, and I got him up to the surface and he let it go. And so I put a waypoint down on him, and I actually in the tournament I actually went back. I ran 20 miles and went back just to catch that fish, and I got him,
Really?
which was crazy. My non-boater was freaking out. I go, man, it's here. I know it's here. And about my third dunk, my line just went tweak. I said, there he is, man. Got him.
So, I mean, milfoil, I guess there'd be four main types of grass that smallmouth will inhabit: the milfoil, the cabbage, hydrilla, and I mean,
Yeah.
there's and
And
eelgrass.
you're right. And then the eelgrass. Eelgrass is tricky though. Um, and I'm going to talk about eelgrass next week too, but eelgrass is tricky because um, the cleaner the water, the deeper it can grow.
Right.
I don't prefer the eelgrass, actually. Um, can't crank it. Boats run through it all. They chop it all up. It gets all over the water, and you can't run moving baits because all you're doing is picking up floating leaves, for lack of a better word, and it makes it really hard to fish. Now, I know Bo Dowden on Thousand Islands won flipping a jig in the eelgrass. But what he did at Thousand Islands, he was actually in the river, and the current had rolled the eelgrass over.
Wow.
And so what he was doing was he was flipping through the eelgrass where it rolled over and
Canopy.
made that little current break tunnel. So he was fishing, the eelgrass would be bent over. I think we're going to have to do an illustration.
Uh-oh. An on the fly illustration.
Yeah,
Let's
it's
see it,
going to
Uncle
be
Frank.
really terrible illustration, but
It'll be better than anything I could ever dream of
you'll
drawing.
get my drift. So what happens is in the current, and I'm going to make a little current arrow, and then the fish will be positioned underneath this canopy.
I've seen this with a flogger before, out on Thousand Islands with Travis Manson.
It's crazy, isn't it? So
Yeah.
they get underneath this
Because
canopy.
you can't see him.
No,
it just
you
looks
can't
like
see 'em.
eelgrass. And then he's like, is there the grass down there? And you flip down there and don't.
Correct. So here's what happens. This is how Bo Dowden won this thing like a freaking million years ago. So that's how old I am. So here's what happens. Okay. So you've got your eelgrass. The current's
Mhm.
going the current's going
Yep.
that way. The eelgrass rolls over the way the current's pushing it, and the bass literally get underneath that.
Perfect ambush point. And you've got current, and anything that rolls
Right.
by them, they just dart out and smoke it.
Correct. And that's what he did. So when he would pitch, he would pitch. So when he would pitch that, punch it, that would be his punch line.
Mm-hmm.
Because you want it to get, whoa, look at that, man. You do it in the day and you go to hell in a handbasket. So you want it to get right at the base. That's the biggest current break right there
Mm-hmm.
at the base. And the bass will just sit in there and wait. But eelgrass is tough. I won't say I don't fish it. I just don't like fishing
Yeah.
the eelgrass.
It's interesting. You don't really ever hear about them catching them out of the grass at like Pickwick or anything like that, like all the smallmouth. I mean,
No.
maybe they do, but it seems like it's definitely that kind of northeast quadrant where the smallmouth utilize the grass.
Dude, I love fishing up north. I love fishing up
Mhm.
north. The fisheries do so many different things at the same time. So you could literally find your strength and fish your strength. You don't need, like Pickwick's crazy. Smallmouth and Pickwick are crazy, and I'll tell you We're going all over the board here, man, but
No, we're
this is
good.
cool. So here's the deal with Pickwick. Current is everything. Everything. Absolutely 100% everything to catch smallmouth on Pickwick. And when you think the current's too strong, you are so absolutely wrong. Those fish will be in the heaviest current imaginable. Now I'm talking smallmouth, not largemouth. Those fish will be in the heaviest current imaginable because a boulder the size of a baseball will make a current break big enough for a 4-pound smallmouth to sit behind. Because as the current washes over that little boulder, there's the current break. Bigger boulders, like the size of, I don't know, a chair, for example, will have 2 current breaks on them. One directly in front of the boulder where the boulder meets the bottom, and the other one is behind the boulder. So it's really crazy, but you have to remember the faster the current, the harder it is to get a bait to the fish. So you have to use, if you're bouncing bottom, you have to use heavier weights according to the current. But but Pickwick's crazy. I want to go back to Pickwick, to be honest with you. I want to go back to Pickwick because there's things that I know now that I didn't know the times that I actually fished the lake. And I don't mean about the lake, I mean about the animal. So I want to go,
How it behaves in the lake.
Right. So I want to go back and correct.
Okay. This, I believe, I have found an underwater illustration of eelgrass in current.
100%. That's
and
exactly
if
what
I
it does.
zoom in on this more, I know this front one is you can see it, but I want to focus on this small one.
Correct.
Right back here, just because it's a perfect example. You can see a hard bottom, but what you're seeing right where that mouse is the shadow. Now extrapolate that to like a big chunk like this. Now you have a shadowy canopy that fish can tuck right in behind. Bait comes past, bait comes down. That's where that fish is. Not on this clump like this, but a bigger clump like that.
Correct.
You can just see the illustration of it.
100%.
Is that accurate?
That is 1,000%.
I mean, it literally
accurate.
looks like you're drawing.
Yeah, that's exactly what it does. It's crazy. It's okay. So without getting too in detailed, they'll spawn in that stuff because they got shelter on one side and a current break, so they could literally spawn in that.
Wow. Which
we're
is a
covering
prelude to next week's show.
Yeah,
next week will be a recorded show. I will be at the Bassmaster Open at Bugs Island / Kerr Reservoir in Virginia. We're doing a comprehensive spawn and spawning bass episode next week. So just a little taste of that. This week we wanted to cover smallmouth in the grass, and then we are going to spend the second half of the show talking about combating rising and falling water, which is something that a lot of people around the country are dealing with right now.
Correct. And it can be brutal and it could be rewarding.
Mm-hmm. But first, I don't know. Typically we got something at Lure Net that you need to show everybody.
Well,
we do.
We have the BTL 100 code is still good till June 30th, 15% off. The new lizard colors are out and available, so check those out. And then, of course, the Speed N in olive orange craw. There's a few left, so if you're interested, get them while they're there. I designed the olive orange craw color, and here's exactly why I made this color. In the previous episodes when we were talking about cold water cranking and the color red and all that stuff. Here's why I designed this color. Okay. So what happens is, you guys know from the previous shows that as the water warms, bass start to get off of crayfish and they start to get onto baitfish oriented patterns as the water warms. So in your transition from the hot reds to shad patterns, I needed a pattern that was taking me away from the reds, getting more natural. Then I can go into my baitfish pattern. That's why I did this color, because I would throw this color right in that time where you could start swapping over to baitfish patterns. That color will translate. It's not so stark and hard that it's typical cold water red. It's more of a transient color tone. And so that just follows my progression of how I, graduate into my baitfish patterns. So that was the whole premise behind that particular pattern.
Good stuff. And then did you also say there's a new spine craw color?
Yeah, but we'll get into that on the next episode. But there's going to be new spine craw colors, and I believe
bedfish colors potentially.
Yeah, potentially.
Potentially, maybe a little preview of next week's show.
Yes, good colors. I have the colors, so I'll get to show them to you next week. But yeah, they'll be available May 1st, and I'm really excited about that. I was going to dive into my boat before this show and grab my craw box, because it's you know how anal I am, so it's really it's a funny box. It's not a big giant one. It's just got two sides to it. It's a little bit smaller than a 3700, but it's a little bit deeper, and I put all my craws in Ziploc bags and label them. And so I've got like 7 or 8 spine craw colors. I got 3 speed craw colors, and then I got a couple of money craws in there. And that's my craw box. That goes with me everywhere I go, because the spine craw is a very versatile little bait. Jig, you could use them as jig trailers, shaky heads. You can Texas rig them and flip with them. Very versatile bait. And a lot of the waters that I fish up here have both largemouth and smallmouth, so it appeals to both. Very similar to the way the lizard appeals to both, which we call the lizard, but as you know from last show, it's really a salamander.
All right, I'm back. Like I said, we're battling the internet, Frank.
I can see you kind of like do a fade out on me.
Yeah.
When it's going to go, I know you're going.
All right. Here's what I want to get into the second half. You mentioned 7 straight days of rain. I'm headed to Bugs Island. There's been a lot of rain that's coming down there. It's raining 3 days in a row here in Oklahoma. We've talked about fishing muddy water. We've talked about high water. We've talked about that. But there is a time period that is happening across a lot of the country, and that's right now, which is you've had some phenomenal fishing. You talked about the first part of the show, how you had phenomenal fishing. You had the fish located, then you had a drop. Same thing's going on in Oklahoma. Yep. First big waves on the bed. Now we're getting inches of rain. Right. What I want to dive into in the second half of this show is that first big influx of water event that happens across the country everywhere, and how you can somehow stay on the fish. I mean, you're in the prime of the year. You should be catching the most and the biggest fish.
Right.
And it seems like every year it's like, oh man, here comes 5 inches of rain and now I'm screwed. What are some things where if you've got to go fishing during this time period, you can at least up your odds and put yourself in a position to get a few bites under some adverse conditions, that first massive influx of water that comes every spring?
Okay. So here, look, this is like a multiple part answer, because there's a million different conditions. Not really a million, but a lot. So the first thing you want to realize is, like, here, our first high water episode occurred during our worst cold front ever. So the water level rose, but as it rose, it dropped the lake temperature about 10 degrees. So on this particular body of water, it had come up, but the water temperature had dropped. Previous to that, there was floods of fish to the bank, floods of them to the bank. That cold water set those fish back. So what happens is when the bass go to the bank in the spring, they're not necessarily going to go, oh, let's go back out to 30 feet of water. It's getting cold, water's coming down, let's get out of here. They back out in front of the water. And here's a really good example. Whoever fishes, I know for a fact you've seen this before. You have a high water episode, and then the water drops. And you see these, I'm going to call them puddles, okay, where they're landlocked puddles, basically, where the water went down. You'll see catfish in them, you'll see carp in them, but you never see a bass in them. Bass won't get caught. They don't get caught. They know the water level's dropping and they stay in front of the drop. They move out with the water. So we're talking about springtime. So here's the thing. In the warmer seasons, when you have a high water episode, I look for steeper banks because the bass can't get behind. They can't get way away from me. If you've got a shallow area like something on the Red River and the water comes up, those fish could be 200 yards in the woods and you can't reach them. You can't get to them. So if you find a steeper bank, they can't get away from you. They just go up and down with the water. So in the springtime, everybody knows bass don't go somewhere for nothing. They'll use ditches, creek channels, as roads, as highways. So basically, a bass uses contour lines like we use roads. So they follow contours in, they follow contours out. So at that point, what I do is I'll look on my map and I'll see, because it's spring, so we know the bass are coming to the bank or we're on the bank. So I'll use my contour maps. I'll find steeper areas. Now, notice I said steeper, not necessarily deeper, just more vertical, 45-degree vertical areas in the same places those bass want to go spawn. Now what's going to happen is as that water level drops, those bass pull out. Those are the areas they're going to utilize. They're not going to go back out into the main lake. That's not why they're up there. They're up there to have babies and do their thing. So they're not just going to leave. It's too late in the spring for that. Now where you guys are, it's too late in the spring for that. Where I'm at, it could happen on some of our colder water lakes. But most of our shallow lakes, they're already up there. So that's kind of how you put the high percentage in your favor. Can you get them on shallow flats? You can. But what happens is the water comes down on those shallow flats, the bass start to spread way out. They need some comfort. Their comfort is, I'm not going to get caught high and dry. So they're always going to be in front of the water level as it falls down. And that's the key in the spring. The other key in the spring is temperature. Was it warm rain or was it sleet and snow kind of rain? Because that's going to also give you issues. Because if it's sleet, snow, water temperature dropping, you got muddy water coming in the system, you're going to have to go more mid-lake to find cleaner water. You're going to have to get away from up the lake and start working your way down the lake to find cleaner water. Because cold, muddy water is a real problem early spring, unless the lake is always off-colored and dirty. Then it's not going to be as big of a problem.
And obviously, you're going to want to slow down then too if it's a sleet and rain. So a jig, mainly a jig. I would assume a jig or a Texas rig fish slow.
Yes, that and slow roll a spinnerbait. This is when I'll oversize the blades on a spinnerbait so I could float them. I call it floating them. It's not, you don't really float them, but the blade size is so big you can creep them and they stay up in the water column. They don't want to fly to the top because you're super slow rolling them, and they won't sink to the bottom because of the double Colorados or the Indiana or the turtleback blade is going to hold them up there. I'll do the same thing with a willow combo, putting giant blades on them. and then I can slow them way down on a lighter spinner bait and keep them from wanting to drop on me.
So to recap, you have fish in the pre-spawn that are wanting to get up there and spawn. You have what I like that term, a weather event. Water comes up rapidly, and now it's falling.
Correct.
Not ideal conditions. You have cold, rain, sleet. What I'm going to do is I want to first, I know I'm going to target the mid-lake section or a portion of that lake that is least likely to get blown out.
Right. You want to be in the most stable water color condition.
So I want a pockets or something that doesn't have a ton of inflow in the back that is just pumping ice cold water.
Correct.
So I'm looking for dead end stuff, or
preferably
mid lake, good spawning habitat, and then I'm going to use my mapping. I'm going to use my eyeballs to determine areas that have a little bit deeper bank to where those fish can pull off. If I have everything I want, but it's 2 foot where my boat is 30 feet off the bank, that's no comfort. If it's 5 or 6 foot, little bit of stair step, and now I can follow those fish out. So now I've got a game plan on what I'm doing, where I'm doing it, how I'm doing it, and the fish that I'm targeting.
Right. And here, you know what's funny? I learned this saltwater fly fishing.
Really?
Yeah. Here's the deal. When I would saltwater fly fish for reds and stuff, you play the tide. Obviously, the outgoing tide is the best tide because it's bringing the fish out to you. All right. The current movement is making them want to feed. But here's what I learned. You would see these grass flats and you don't see any tails, you don't see nothing. And then you come to a little run where all the current's ripping out of this grass flat because the tide's going down. It's got a very defined drain. Because of the water movement, it's probably got shells on both sides of that drain. But all them reds pool out to those little ditches and sit in the ditches. So it made it real easy because we just go down and you just fish where the drains come out of the flats. And it made it easy. That's how I learned this about bass. Because they won't get you don't see game fish caught in puddles.
That's a good point.
You know,
it's always some carp or drum up there going, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. Oh,
right.
crap.
How much time do I got left? Exactly.
All right. So different scenario. Let's say it's a warm spring rain and the water is coming up like that.
Now we're talking about coming up, not going down.
Yeah.
Okay. Warm spring rain, water coming up. If it's off colored and dirty water, I'll stay in the same area. I'll try to find where the off color water is mixing with the cleaner water, and I'll go up with the water.
So you'll follow the water up.
I'll follow the water up. There's times when the water's coming up in the spring. It's not dirty. It is clean. Like on Table Rock, that happened to me.
Yep.
I was on Smallmouth. The water was coming up, I think 5 to 7 feet a day.
Oh, it comes up ridiculously fast there.
And my smallmouth never left where they were at.
So they were in 3 foot of water.
And then,
now they're in 8 foot of water.
Right. And then so on and so on and so on as the water came up.
Okay.
And so I had to make sure I knew how high that water was coming up, because if I got in front of those smallmouth, I couldn't catch them. You follow me?
Were they on beds?
No, they were getting ready. It was early spring. They canceled the tournament. It was the tournament they canceled.
I remember that.
I was catching every time I shut my boat down, I could add 18 to 22 pounds of smallies. Yeah.
That's doing something.
Oh, it was crazy. They were shutting that lake down, and actually I was catching them 12 to 15 feet deep. And by the last day of the tournament, they had so much water over them, it was like 28 feet deep. But I wasn't moving. I was still fishing the same areas. And what happened was I started running the pattern I got on it late the first day of practice, late. Ran out the next day to duplicate. The water had come up about 4 or 5 feet the first day. Realized that, picked my depth range accordingly, and never hit the same spot twice. I was only looking for new stuff. And every time I would stop and shut that boat down, it was like I'd hook one, there'd be 10 with it coming
Oh,
with
wow.
it. Yeah, it was ludicrous. And here I was using a 4-inch Yum Dinger on an 1/8 ounce jig head. Which this was before like everybody was doing the Ned deals. And so I ran into a buddy of mine, Mark, on the lake, and he said he'd been catching them, but he's focusing more on largemouth. And he mentioned the water coming up, and I said, "Yeah, it's ludicrous, dude." And the next day when I went out, the water was even way higher, and I started working my way back towards where we were going to blast off. Now I added that water level on to my game plan. I didn't realize how much the water came up on that second day, so I ran to a spot where I caught them before. Sat on my waypoint, threw up to the fish and caught them, and looked at my depth finder to see how much that water came up. So now I knew that I had to be in, I forget the exact depth now, but let's just say 22 feet. I had to be in 22 feet of water to catch the fish that were in 12. And so anyway, so I'm duplicating this uh, pattern as I'm working my way towards blast off to where we were going to blast off. So the last day of practice, I launched the boat, and I can finish from where I'm, finish where I left off to just past where we're blasting off. And then I'll have shit, dude. I would have had 40 spots to fish.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm killing them. I run into Tucker the last day, and he goes,
Mark Tucker.
Yeah. He goes, you might, right. Ooh, that's a dandy. So, so Tuck tells me, he goes, dude, go home. They canceled the tournament. The lake's too high.
No, you thought he was
flooded.
jacking with you.
Yeah. So I go, come on, dude. He goes, no, they canceled the tournament, and you better head back, because did you launch by your hotel? And I go, yeah. He goes, you may not get under the bridge to get back. I go, dude, you're crazy. That bridge is like a mile above the water level. You're crazy. I told him. I said, I'm staying and fish. I said, you want to fish with me? Let's put your boat somewhere. We'll come back later and get it, and we'll go fishing. He goes, no, I'm getting out. I'm leaving. I said, okay, no sweat. So I'm still working my way back to where I put my boat launched, but now I'm catching fish, because I'm like, well, if the tournament's canceled, I'm going to just catch them. So now I'm crashing on them. Well, sure enough, I'm running to go to another spot that I hadn't fished yet. I'm kind of in my pre-fish mode, but I'm catching them now. Now I'm not leaving until I can't catch anymore. So I'm going to run to this one other place, and here comes Creek. Creek comes flying down. He sees me, he spins around. He goes, Scalish, man. He goes, they canceled the tournament. You got to get off the lake. The DNR is telling everybody to get off the lake. I go, dude, let's tie your boat up and come fish with me, man. He goes, are you catching them? I go, I'm absolutely throttling them. He goes, are you I go, no, I said, dude, I'm not kidding. I can catch them at will anywhere I want, as long as it's the right shit. So anyhow, so he goes, no, they're telling us to get off the lake. So I go, all right, I'll be, half hour behind you. I'm gonna fish. I'm fishing. So I ran to another spot. I'm catching fish. I'm having a good time. I'm catching fish. I go. I said, I better get on the other side of the bridge, because I don't know how high the water is coming up. So I better get on the other side of the bridge. Dude, I got to that bridge, and it was like, holy smokes, man. I could get under it, but I could barely get under it. And I'm like, oh my God. So I said, I better just go. Okay, I better just go. So I run around the corner because I was right around the corner from where I put in at. And I'm the only truck in the parking lot. And my truck tires are in the water up to
Oh
my
no.
rims. I'm like, what? So, and the DNR guy, when I came idling up, he was putting a chain link around the gate so you can't get to the
Yeah.
ramp anymore. I'm like, dude, I idled right into the parking lot with my boat, and I tied it off to a guardrail. And then I jumped out in the water and talked to the guy. I said, open the gate, dude, I'm coming out. So he opened the gate. I literally got in my truck and drove my truck around to the road where the gate was at. And then because the parking lot and then the road to the gate, and then it goes down to the ramp. So I just put my boat straight in the opening of the gate, and I mean my truck, and I backed the truck down till it was, till my trailer had enough water on it because it's flat where I was at. And then I drove the boat on the trailer, jumped back out of the boat in the water, locked it down, got in my truck, and drove out. And the DNR guy goes, "It's a good thing you came in when you came in, because your stuff would have been underwater, because we're closing the gates." And then, sure enough, that evening, Branson, Missouri flooded. All the water went over the dam and flooded out of Branson. It was crazy.
That might be a top 5 Frank Scalish story.
Dude, I was literally crying. I was crying inside.
Yeah, you were a lock for that. I know, you know what? I do know what 4-inch dinger you were not throwing though.
Which one?
You were not throwing the Northern Lights 4-inch dinger, because that is a new color available on lurenet.com, and it is a 4-inch exclusive.
I was absolutely not throwing it. I'll tell you what color I was throwing. What? I was throwing green pumpkin purple.
Not a surprise.
Mm-mm.
Not a surprise. On just what were you Texas rigging it, or just throwing it on an open jig head? So were you Ned rigging before Ned rigging was Ned rigging?
Yeah, it was just on a little 1/8 ounce ball head.
It's a Ned rig.
Yeah, I'd fire it out there and just
boom,
let it go, and all of a sudden my line would go.
But that water stayed clear, and it wasn't
stayed clean.
Getting
never
cold.
Got there. No.
Yeah.
No. But the bass, the smallies, never moved up with the water, and Mark was catching largemouth, and his largemouth were moving up with the water.
Moving up with it. So that's another way to do it. That's good stuff, Frank. Did you hear that thunder boomer?
I heard something.
That was thunder.
Outstanding.
That's good stuff.
I couldn't hear it. I got guys working on the house next door, and all I hear is their stupid machinery.
Oh, sometimes you got to take care of business.
Yeah, which is, it's peaceful.
I hear you. What else you got? What else you got for this week before we wrap it up? We covered a lot of information with a couple good stories sprinkled in too.
Yeah, we went full circle. Next week's going to be an exciting show. We're going to talk about spawning, mostly locations. Not so much how to catch a spawning bass, although I'm sure we'll dive into some of it.
I love it. All right. This has been another edition of Day 4 with Frank Scalish. Day 4, 110. 111.
No, 110.
Coming up next week. This is 110. Next week.
111.
111.
We're in.
All right. Thank you. BTL Day 4 on a Wednesday. Thanks for everybody who hopped on and got a taste of Frank a day early. So we'll see you guys next week.